All right, welcome to Inside the Numbers. It is a audio only day today. I don't know what to tell you. Yeah, really having some mechanical issues, but that's all right because it's going to be a very visual day today. All right, there's going to be a lot of things to share. Um, and there's a couple of things we're going to revisit that I'm going to share first because they're really kind of connected. It's the same, some of the same sourcing, and then it's connected. So we're just going to wind up circling back. There's a lot to show anyway. So we're going to do what Laura hates, which is when I am talking and going on this like rant. She hates it when I always like misdirect the camera angle back to something I'm showing on the screen, and she wants to put it on me all the time. So today she really just has to deal with it not being on me at all. All right, so let's show first and foremost. So we're going to talk about, look, there it is, why the COVID attacks are not working against Donald Trump in 2024. And I feel like there are, it's not just Ron DeSantis' campaign, it's everyone's campaign. And I get it because they're really frustrated and they don't really know what to do next. And I mean, really, the truth is, look, Asa Hutchinson did not even qualify for this next debate. They're going to try to squeeze as much money out of him as they possibly can. It's like this consulting class grift is, I used to think it was sad, but I don't anymore. I think that they kind of deserve what they get. But here's the problem: they get money, and so it becomes less about winning and more about squeezing the remaining blood out of the stone that the candidate has. So um, here we have Ron DeSantis, and that they really just don't know what to do. They're going around and around in circles, revamping and revisiting the same failed messaging that didn't gain them traction before. And big part of this is the candidate himself, but also, I mean, a lot of this is just amateur hour. You have to know what voters want or care to talk about. And yes, you want to try to drive and be proactive instead of reactive, but they harp on things that is not, they're not priorities to voters. So I guess ultimately the number one answer to why the attacks are not working is very clear. They're not working because that's not what voters give a damn about. COVID is not at the top of their list. All right. So here's the new CBS News poll from YouGov, and it's amazing how these polls work. All right. YouGov economists to the rescue this morning with a Biden +5. Leave it to Reuters and Ipsos and YouGov and The Economist, Yahoo News, who also uses YouGov. Very much, I told you this would happen. They're going to do this. They're going to be themselves outliers, which then nobody will call outliers. So everyone has Trump up except for those two polls. And by the way, don't you find it funny that Monmouth did not release their general election poll? But anyway, I digress. All of the so-called high quality polls, right? Those live caller only, they all have Trump up. Fox Business, NBC is a tie, but ABC's Trump +10. CNN is Trump +what, 1 or 2. Heart Research alone without public opinion was Trump +3. I know that Obama's pollster has Trump now up by 2. And I know Doug Schoen has Trump up by a few. Those are internal polls going around in Democratic circles. Interestingly, too, the Doug Schoen poll has Trump's approval rating, which you saw in the ABC News Washington Post poll, completely reversed from what it was when he was in office. It's like hindsight. That happens with presidents a lot. But with Doug Schoen's poll, I have to go back and look at it again. I want to say, guys, it was like 52 approve or 54 approve or something. It was crazy. And 44 disapprove. I mean, it was like, in hindsight, did you approve or disapprove of the job he was doing? And I think that's ultimately what's happening with these polls as these panel pollsters swing back and forth. And it's like they're all getting these panel responses from the same place. YouGov has an overcommitment, so now they have to go to my supplier. I'm not even joking. They have to go to my vendor to get it. Maybe I shouldn't say that to talk crap about them, but it's true. They used to have their own consumer panel. Now they're forced to reach out. And you'll see different results from the same data set. And that's just the pollster doing whatever the hell they want. Or in this case, CBS News is going to have some say. They give me the register voter 1011 data set, and CBS over here will do it. And I imagine in concert, that's what they did. And you can see how they did it by age, race, education, and geographic region based on the US Census current population survey, as well as past vote. I disagree with that. The US Census, unless you're going to do all adults, um, there are better measurements. There really are. Now you can start with the census like Rasmussen does. You can start with the census representation, which a lot of panel polls do anyway. They're balancing for census representation. That's the secret. So national poll. What are we going to do with quotas and targeting? We could just do a simple census balance, and then we will control the demographics that we're filtering for on the way, and then ultimately apply a weight that we feel is some maybe it's proprietary, maybe it's not, but a lot of people do a modeling um, weight before they do a rake weight or something, or propensity. And I know I should go over that in like small, separate, detailed videos. I should go over the difference between propensity, rake, modeling, all that stuff. And I think you guys would find a benefit to that. But it depends. I'm a big believer in rake, but I have my own stuff, and I don't mind sharing some of it. I don't think people would be able to duplicate it as well anyway. So, but anyway, you can see what they do here. And then, as well as past vote results here are reported among likely Republican caucus and primary, and the margin of error is 6.1 in Iowa. That's big. And 5.4. And it's not a margin of error. Come on, CBS News. It's a sampling error. This isn't, we're in 2023. It's not a traditional margin of error, because you did not random digital dial this puppy. This is a panel poll. It isn't quite an opt-in. It is representative, or damn well should be. But overall, it's confidence interval. If there's mixed mode, some kind of component in there that they're not mentioning, then you can say an overall sampling error. But it is not a margin of error. That is an incorrect statement. It just is. And by the way, isn't APOR supposed to be what the hell function does APOR even serve anymore? I'm with Jim Lee 100% on this. Where on earth they just sit around, a bunch of leftist pollsters sit around and like mock everybody and have their little seminars with their members' fees. They serve no purpose. They police the industry none. They don't, unless it's a right-wing pollster like Rasmussen. They love to attack them. And I don't even want to say right-wing. Pollster they perceive as right-wing, because actually Rasmussen has an independent, a Democrat, and I believe 2 Republicans. All right. Anyway, New Hampshire, it was 5.4, 502. And so anyway, basically, what does this poll show? It shows a lot in both Iowa and in New Hampshire. But going to what we're talking about now, about why the COVID stuff is not working, what it really shows, folks, is that it's not working because nobody gives a damn about COVID. Ultimately, you cannot bank your entire campaign on something nobody cares about. And that's one part of why it's not working. Of course, it's a major part, and we can't overlook it. But it's also true that it's also the case that it's not really true. Well, I'm talking about what they're saying, how they're portraying the governor's record is not really true. And that's a major problem, because of course it has to be true in order for it to be effective. All right. Now, it doesn't mean every criticism against Ron DeSantis is also true. I think there's some that have gone a little bit too far with it, and they're misrepresenting what the governor did as well. So I'd like to try to give him a fair representation today, but ultimately it coming down to the fact that things that they have in fact claimed are just false. Okay. And that's it. So voters, especially, look, when we're polling Florida and DeSantis is down 60-14 or some ridiculous number, you have got to start to ask yourself, what the hell is the problem? What's going on? What is it that's not resonating? All right. And that's really what we're going to do. All right. All right. So, God, leave it to the DeSantis campaign to get me to agree with CNN, which I find to be bleh. Like I want to vomit at the fact that in some of these cases I do, but there's a lot, don't there's a lot that they claim that is just not it's false. But anyway, let's start with what kicked all of this off again this week, all right? And that is a video with Kerry Lake going on a show and making a series of statements about Ron DeSantis's record on COVID. Again, just keep in mind with all this going on in the backdrop of that, really, what do these voters care about? They care about a strong leader who can beat Joe Biden. They're not, I mean, it doesn't matter if you're talking about Iowa, you're talking about New Hampshire, and you ask about the issues. We could go back to the Fox News poll. By the way, Trump is at or above 50 in these polls. So much that. And Bob Vanderplatz goes, this shows us it's wide open. The media loves a horse race, and they ask the question about persuadability a different way. Selzer, myself, many others for years who know how to pull a caucus basically we don't do that. What they did in this. We don't say, are you this? Are you maybe consider? I'm only this. You don't do that. You simply ask them who they're going to caucus for at this moment, who their second choice is. What is there? Are they considering them? That's fine to see a footprint. But then ultimately you have to ask them. A caucus is a gathering. It is not a primary. Are you persuadable? And it doesn't matter who it is. Roughly, well, now it's above 2/3. But most of us have found that Trump is ballpark 75-80% voters are not persuadable. And that contrast, and by the way, DeSantis' own internal polling just showed that the other day. All right. It was, I don't know if it was meant to be released or not, but, WPA into whatever they're called. I don't even know. They also showed that DeSantis and Nikki Haley are very, very weak support. Their true bases are like 4.5%, 5%. Everybody is finding the same thing. Whereas Trump's, it's done. It's a done deal. 40+% are just not moving. So, what else do you expect? Do you think this judge's ruling in New York yesterday is going to do a damn thing to move his support? It's not. You think religious leaders are going to do a damn thing to move that support? We can actually go over that, and we will in a little bit, which is the second segment. You think Kim Reynolds, again, second segment, we're going to get into that. If you're looking at the Fox poll, the Seltzer poll, our poll, everyone's poll, Iowa voters simply don't care about COVID. Primary voters nationwide don't care about COVID. They want to beat Joe Biden. They want to dismantle the administrative state, and they want the economy to run the way it was running under Donald Trump. They want, dare I say, revenge. As far as the Republican primary electorate goes, a majority of them want revenge. I don't blame them. Their presidency was robbed. It was stolen from them. They beat one of, if not the most powerful political families, political dynasties in modern American history. And instead of being able to govern the way every other president is allowed to govern, the permanent unelected administrative state engaged in sedition against them. And they were not, look, why does that matter? Self-governance needs a release valve. The pressure builds up. One side doesn't get their way. Just when they're about to explode, they win an election. And they get to advance their agendas. And then it releases the pressure. If you keep going from one election to another where one is just robbed, one after the other, eventually the pressure is going to blow. And Republican primary voters right now, that's where they're at. And I did a thread yesterday to try to cut through some of the noise. I was going to write an article on that. I probably still will. I have to travel tomorrow. I'm leaving. And by the way, we're going to do a short stream or something on Friday when I'm traveling. We're not going to do an Inside the Numbers because the next episode of Inside the Numbers is episode 400. And I don't want some lame production on episode 400. So we'll do a short stream or something like that while I'm going to travel because I'm going to be on Timcast on Friday. So we'll do something and we'll talk about it. But yeah, you know what? Without further ado, well, I'm going to revisit this. Without further ado, let's play the clip that caused them to recycle the same stuff over and over again.
Let us not forget that DeSantis also shut the beaches down. DeSantis took a page out of Gavin Newsom's playbook. Despite what he says, he shut the beaches down.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
We don't want them gathering.
Wait, I did the wrong thing. Here we go.
On that face-off between DeSantis.
Was Rubin's response, which I actually kind of thought was funny myself. But again, they overstepped. And even if they could get people to care about COVID, they have to stop overplaying their hand. It's already too late. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's already too late. And the primary is over. All right. I'm not going to live in this delusional world with everybody else. The primary is over. All right. I don't want to say what I want to say, but only two things are going to stop Donald Trump from not being the Republican nominee. And I don't want to say either one of them out loud because I am a big believer that words have power. And I'm not going to say those things out and push them into the universe for, God forbid, something horrible like that, to happen.
On that face-off between DeSantis, let us not forget that DeSantis also shut the beaches down. DeSantis took a page out of Gavin Newsom's playbook. Despite what he says, he shut the beaches down. He did force vaccines. He did force face masks on our kids. So he tries to act like he was perfect. And Florida was
DeSantis forced vaccines on kids?
He forced vaccines on people, on workers. He forced face masks on children. And he was for all that. DeSantis was for all of that. So he thinks that we forgot that as well. Now, granted, he didn't continue the misery as long
as... Was it 1 month or a couple weeks on what it was?
It was a little more than that. The beaches were shut down to people.
Right.
So anybody who shuts a beach down, I mean...
All right, so then it's 19 seconds. Let me play Dave Rubin's little clip. He says, "Carry meet Trump." And before I do, there are three claims there that need to be addressed. One, he shut the beaches down. Two, he masked the kids. And three, he forced vaccines on people. Okay. We're going to address all three of those claims here. If you're the DeSantis campaign, there are ways you could have responded without going over the top, which of course they did. And here's the problem. The last time they attacked Kerry Lake, which I told them was a stupid move. All right. And whatever. What did they do in response? Right. The same smears and nasty and vitriol, even though it was simple advice. I mean, how many times it's not just us, many others. Polling Arizona, there are two politicians in the state of Arizona that are the most popular for Republicans, and it is dumb to attack either one of them in certain ways. One is Donald Trump. He is by far the most popular Republican figure in the state of Arizona. Everyone else except for Kerry Lake, who's only a few points less favorable than Donald Trump. I mean, it's really remarkable. Everyone else down the road, who's running for president, who may be running for Senate, they are way behind, folks, way behind. So there are only plus 50s and plus, 50 something, 60. That is only Donald Trump and Kerry Lake, who have almost, and Trump is about 80% favorable, and Kerry's about 70 something percent favorable. Everybody else, I believe DeSantis was at like 62, and their unfavorables are much higher than Kerry Lake's and Donald Trump. So it just was dumb to attack her. Before they launched this last attack, and I went back and looked at the RCP average. And then in Arizona, there's not much, so they don't have it all up like they do Iowa and elsewhere. But when they launched their attack against Kerry Lake, they were only down by about 15 points in Arizona in some of the polls. When they launched that attack, it blew wide open. They lost not only momentum, they lost any hope of competitiveness in Arizona. And now Trump leads by at least 40 points in the state of Arizona. It was a stupid move. And Arizona's winner take all. So you don't want to lose. But I mean, yeah, it matters. The early states are going to build momentum. But my God, folks, I mean, it's amateur hour. Stupid to overreach and overreact, burn bridges. But that's what they did. So now when you see Kerry making these comments, it's like, well, okay. Did you watch how Team DeSantis treated her the last time? And now here's Dave Rubin putting up a little clip, which I actually, got a chuckle out of. But again, he went too far.
Let us not forget that DeSantis also shut the beaches down. DeSantis took a page out of Gavin Newsom's playbook. Despite what he says, he shut the beaches down.
Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right.
We don't want them gathering, and I see they do gather, including on beaches and including in restaurants, young people.
Okay. I have said over and over again, and by the way, cutting it off there was deceptive. All right, but I'll get to that. I have said this over and over again. When it comes to COVID, the pandemic, there are very few, if any, political heroes, politicians. Everyone, with the exception of Nome, because Nome has a very different state, very different situation. I will grant people that excuse. DeSantis was dealing with a much larger state, an older population, more cluster, right? But okay, then that's fine. You say that. You don't pretend that you acted like Kristi Noem in the beginning because it's not true. And we're going to show you it's not true. That's number one. Number two, the heroes of COVID are few and far between. They were the public figures. The Jay Bhattacharya's who just won the very first ever, and I put it on Twitter the other day. I don't want to butcher this, but it's like schismat or something, and it translates into okay. It's a term that was used by professionals in the Soviet era that they would basically pass back and forth dissenting intellectual opinions and information that, could get you killed, could put you in a gulag, could put you in a labor camp, could get you killed, executed. And anyway, people like Jay Bhattacharya, they're the heroes. All right. People like Robert Barnes, who automatically said there is no precedent in the Constitution, they are the heroes. Robert Barnes and I were arguing with people who are now Team DeSantis from the very beginning. Everyone, as a politician, almost everybody was duped. Even Jack Posobiec will tell you, I initially was on this train and, then I hopped off. Robert Barnes and I were arguing with the likes of Will Chamberlain from the very beginning. I have the receipts and emails to prove it. Telling these guys, I don't care what the polls say right now. You're talking to a pollster. Who the hell do you think you're talking to? I care about two things. What are the polls going to say a year from now? And is there any exception in the U.S. Constitution to any of our liberties for pandemics? As if the founding fathers didn't know about plague and disease. Never before in the history of our country, or never before, has the government shut down by force commerce and activity because of a pandemic. The correct answer is we all bought into it in the beginning, but then we shifted gears. Let me show you something, all right? Because I want to be fair to the governor here. March 16th, and let me make sure I get it because it's, okay. March 16th, Clearwater, Florida, there are spring breakers all over the damn place, okay? Let me pull this up. Here we go. They're telling the media, it's the flu. I don't give a damn. Right? This is a WFLA news in Florida. Look at the interactions. And I tweeted this before, go to X, whatever, formerly known as Twitter. Go and look at the interactions. You will never see 80-something thousand retweets, 60,000 likes, and it's actually more than that. This must be old and updated. This became a national story. It was immense pressure on the governor. And at first, his initial instinct was not to close down the beaches. We've seen some big crowds on the west coast of Florida, and I've had a chance to speak to mayors on both coasts today, DeSantis said. If they want to continue to leave and then continue to, and then in parentheses it says, in brackets, leave the beach open. We want them to have the freedom to do that. But we also want them to have the freedom to do more if they see fit. And you had people walking on the beaches. One guy said, 21-year-old Atlantis Walker of Indiana said, what they're doing is bad. We need a refund. This virus ain't that serious. There's more serious things out there like hunger and poverty. We need to address that. But the media was flipping out. And by the way, Mr. Walker, again, Atlantis Walker, young man, you're one of the heroes of COVID. Here's the Clearwater, Florida report. They're showing, because of 19 new cases, they're showing pictures of these people all over.
What are we looking at? This is
Oh, wow.
a lot of people. So if you think that the beaches are being impacted here by coronavirus, by COVID-19 and by the new cases that are emerging here in Florida, this is Clearwater Beach here, everybody.
That looks like Clearwater.
And one of the questions that we were asked here earlier was whether or not the beaches were going to be impacted by what's going on here with coronavirus in the state of Florida. By the looks of it, this looks to be a pretty busy day here at the beaches. A lot of people here in the water. We know that Miami Beach and Fort Lauderdale Beach and some others in South Florida have closed. What are we looking at?
All right, so now here's what's important to note about that, okay? On March 16th, the CDC guidelines were different. They weren't 10 people to a group, 25 people to a group. Fauci had been saying, the CDC had been saying 250 people on areas like that, on beach areas like that. All right, so the media was making this outrage, and this was an enormous amount of pressure. The question is whether he would hold the line. All right, and then that brings us to 3 days later. The party is over. The party is over. Several viral videos showing all the beachgoers, blah, 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 right? And I'm going to play this video in a second, but let me read what he said, and then we're going to read his executive order. All right, because the executive order is very important. Executive order, and I'm talking about executive order number 20-68. All right, and let me just read from before I get to his statement. Section 1, bars, pubs, and nightclubs, because you have to understand the supporting economy matters. Pursuant to sections 252-365GH, Florida statutes, any licensee authorized to sell alcoholic beverages for consumption on premises that derive more than 50% of its gross revenue, all bars, from the sale of alcohol beverage shall suspend all sale of alcoholic beverages for 30 days from the date of this order, effective at 5 p.m. today, March 17th, 2020. Why does that matter? The comments I'm about to give you were on March 19th. Okay. Moving forward to Section 2, beaches. Pursuant to Section 252-365K Florida statutes, I direct parties accessing public beaches in the state of Florida to follow the CDC guidelines by limiting their gatherings to no more than 10 persons. Pay attention. Distance themselves from other parties by 6 feet. And here we go. Support beach closures at the discretion of local authorities. The beach I just showed you in that video was Clearwater, Florida. By March 19th, the local authorities asked for the governor's help to shut the beach and police the area for violators. You don't believe me? Let's go on with this. This is what he says on Fox and Friends. Oh, and by the way, Miami and Palm were shut by force. No local discretion. They were closed, minimum of 11 days, everybody off. If you walk your dog on the beach, you're in trouble. Now, here's the deal. The point is, were all beaches closed? No. But 2 were closed by force without any question. All right. Others like Clearwater and others on the West Coast, the Panhandle, there were some. I mean, you had, come on, Rich, don't lose it now. The Panama, places like that, Panama Beach. That's where, a lot of spring breakers go. That was the problem. The reason why they were closed, even if local authorities didn't enforce it, is because the supporting economies were not there. So if somebody wanted to take their dog for a walk on the beach, folks, and they stayed away from people, could they technically do that? Yeah, in many places, honestly, because Florida's got a lot of coastline. They could, but for all intents and purposes, most of them were in fact closed because the supporting economies were closed and because of the practical impact of the guidance and limitations being enforced. I mean, honestly, group of 10 during spring break, 6 feet apart. Did you see the pictures? It's like impossible. Again, you and your wife could take a walk. You and your friends maybe could go lay in the sun for a little bit in some of these beaches, but some of the bigger beaches, that just didn't happen. The locals did ask, obviously to have the leeway to close those beaches, and he gave it to them. So then he said, and the other point is, what is the message that the leadership sends? And you know what? I'm not going to. And by the way, as of Thursday morning when this happened, it's right here. There were 322 confirmed cases of COVID-19. 322. All right, so let's play the clip. It's better than just hear it in his own words as opposed to me repeating it. And now we're going to get an ad. Yeah, we're going to get an ad. That's okay. It'll be over soon enough. Here comes 1, 2, and go.
We've been showing you those images of partiers on spring break down in Florida, ignoring the warnings to socially distance from one another.
Yeah, there's at least 20 people in that picture. But now it seems the party may be over as bars and restaurants are closed and some cities have decided to close their beaches. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis joins us right now from Tallahassee. Governor, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Well, those images are disturbing because the CDC says no groups of more than 10, and then you see that stuff. And so I understand Clearwater Beach and Naples have decided to close their beaches to groups. But at the same time, you're not closing the state beaches to groups of less than 10.
Pay attention.
Right?
So the message, I think, for spring breakers is that the party's over in Florida. You're not going to be able to congregate on any beach in the state. Many of the hot spots that people like to go to, whether it's Miami Beach, Fort Lauderdale, Clearwater Beach, are closed entirely for the time being.
Whoa! 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 Entirely.
Bars are closed, so you're not going to have a place to congregate there. So we would just tell those folks, maybe come back next year when things are better. But that is not what we're looking for here.
Come back next year. That's not the same as we followed the guidelines for a few weeks, we screwed up, and then we realized that the politics were infecting the decision-making process, so we immediately moved to reopen them, and the hell with Fauci, I would have fired Fauci. That's not what happened here. It is not at all what happened. I had some girl on Twitter arguing yesterday. She's like, I lived in Florida during most of COVID. Well, I lived in Florida during all of COVID. Don't tell me what happened. They were closed.
Here in the state of Florida, every single beach will have to abide by the CDC guidelines. No more than 10 people. You have to be socially distant. Not every beach is going to remain open, but some will. We have sheriff's deputies in places like Brevard County. They're going to be out on ATVs, making sure there's no groups. And I think that's a.
Whoa! No policing of the beaches, I thought. Again, it's fair to say, not all of the beaches were closed. But the major beaches were closed. Even those that were open, especially in the larger areas, had police state power on the ground, making sure you did not violate the orders. And believe me, people did. And they were, you couldn't just do it, folks, and not expect a cop, a deputy to approach you. Do you want a citation? Are you aware of the executive order?
A good approach. I would point out, though, guys, the images from Clearwater was from the Saturday. At that point, the CDC guidance was groups of 250.
He's right. This is fair. This is true. I got to stop and point this out. At that time, this is the media coming after DeSantis because they wanted, of course, to hurt him politically because that's what the media does. I know the Republicans right now are in a primary. It's not really a competitive one, but they're acting like it is, and they're attacking each other. All right. But at the end of the day, Republicans would do good to remember that what really happened, because this is going to happen again. And Republicans are going to have to learn how to stand together in order to face it. He was under enormous pressure. They wanted him defeated in 22. They were trying to pin COVID around everyone's neck. They knew he had an old population. They were hoping for mass numbers of dead old people. Can we just be real, Laura? Joe Biden's campaign manager was literally talking to Fox News like it was a joke. Wait until there are 200,000 body bags of old people, and then we'll see if Donald Trump can win the state of Florida. This is who you're dealing with. So it's important to remember context. The CDC and Fauci and Birx, they did not on March 16th tell DeSantis that he couldn't have. And by the way, those are groups of 250. I don't even know how you count that. So they were acting like he had to act and remove everyone from those beaches when it wasn't even the guidelines yet. But again, my point is, this is him buckling to that pressure. So he's acting like he stood up, and his team, they all act like he stood up to it from the beginning. He did not. This is him buckling to that pressure. Did you just see how many confirmed cases of coronavirus there was in the state of Florida when he buckled in 3 days? 3 days. Point being, everybody did. And you're better off being honest and saying, you know what, everything was crazy. We all thought that public health officials were giving us honest, professional, expert advice, and we wanted to follow their expert advice. But it became clear, and the reason why I keep saying this is because you're gonna hear them try to pivot to that when CNN catches them in a bunch of lies. You're gonna hear them try to pivot to that. But the statement they even give CNN is nowhere near what the influencers, the surrogates, and the campaign claims sound like. Whether he's on the stump, whether he's on the trail, whether they're on Twitter, whether they're on some other social network, the statement they're making to like the K-File, for instance, is an attempt to acknowledge that this narrative is bullshit. But they still don't do that publicly. So let's finish. But again, it is fair to him that when Clearwater, they were going nuts over that. That wasn't Fauci and Birx having a canary over it at that time. That's the media trying to hurt him politically. And it's important we make these distinctions and keep context in the back of our minds.
Or more. Then on Sunday, they changed it to 50. And so we were working with locals to try to figure out, okay, what would make sense for us on a whole variety of things. And then the next day on Monday, they changed it to the 10. And so that's at that point, we're like, okay, well, we just need to steer clear of any large groups. So we did it for the beaches, and then we did it for the bars and closed the bars down. So, and I also would say this, we're seeing massive cancellations going forward. I think some of those pictures were for people who had started coming down here before this got to the level that it did. And so I think a lot of this stuff, you're going to see a lot fewer people coming into Florida right now. The numbers are really off the charts in terms of the cancellations.
Governor, I'm so glad you came on to explain that, because I was going to ask you, what do you...
Just remember, look at Ainsley. Look at Ainsley's smug face right now. Her, Ducey, him, they're proud of that. They're proud of the lost business. Why? Because they're reacting to the media. They're not being proactive. They're not standing up to anybody. They're caving like everybody did. Everybody.
say to the critics that say this should have been done a lot sooner. But Saturday was a totally different story than it is here Thursday. Many of us were planning different events at the beginning of the week, and all of those were canceled. What do you say? I was reading a story that Clearwater's not closing its beaches, though, until Monday.
Right. Well, so they got to make the decisions as how they see it. But regardless of those local decisions, you're not going to be able to congregate like those images that you saw. That's just not something that we're going to allow. And so, we want to work constructively with the locals to get the best solutions. But I would also say when you have these types of cancellations, that's going to have a major effect on a lot of workers in the state of Florida. Our unemployment rate prior to this got down to 2.8%.
It was glorious. So if you know that, then you know better. You knew better at the time. And again, I understand having a very difficult time. The public health officials were, seen as experts. People trusted them, and I get it. But again, just be honest. I mean, Fauci, the minute he said this will be inconvenient economically for people, I understand it'll be inconvenient economically, but we're talking about lives here. When the moment he said that, which was early, it was just one more confirmation to me. This guy is full of it.
I mean, just our economy was humming, things were going along great. And now this external event, this virus, is going to dislocate a lot of people. And so, we're very mindful of that. And we're working hard to be able to work with them, just as we work to be able to protect our citizens from
COVID. We get it. But the fact is, they didn't. And people like Laura and I, our friend, Mary, for instance, COVID took her establishment out. I mean, so many of them, Yummies, Laura, never made it back. I can't even count. And but what is Yummies? It was authentic. There were 2 locations in Florida, authentic Chinese. It's one of the places where you could go and actually get Chinese food the way it really is. I mean, not Americanized Chinese food. And Florida was known for that establishment. And I think their flagship, which I can't remember where exactly, because I haven't been, it might be Orlando, but their flagship restaurant survived, but the other did not. So so at the end of the day, there was no doubt there was pain spread here. So what I'm saying is, there were others like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and many, who did from the beginning say that this is not normal. This will have catastrophic consequences. And if you didn't listen to them and because one of the things Carrie Lake said is, no, we're not talking about a few weeks. It wasn't a few weeks. The initial order for Palm and Miami was 11 days. It was extended. A lot of these orders were extended. There is, of course, too, the issue of the vaccines. There was never a statewide vaccine mandate in the state of Florida. I'm not going to go and show all of the damn clips, but on this very program, he was more than happy to do this with Mr. Henry Sayre, one of the oldest World War II veterans. He was very happy to put on the stage production with him jabbing Henry with the Pfizer shot. The minute it was available, he absolutely had enormous pressure on state workers to get the vaccine. How do I know? My wife was one of them. All right. And it was like, you were a pariah if you did not want to get that vaccine. So while there was not a mandate, it was like this enormous social pressure among state employees. And as far as the kids with masks, the schools were closed despite the data showing that was not only unnecessary, but harmful. So that was no different in Florida. But when they did reopen outside of distance learning, they were absolutely forced to wear a mask. And it was not until months when eventually the governor said, we're done with the mask. The evidence is clear. And then two school districts, Alachua County and Broward County, refused to abide by the governor's orders. He took them to court. He won. But he did not, from the beginning, go against the mask mandates in the schools. The schools had masks mandated. The kids were masked. My wife at the time was 8 months pregnant and had health things with the mask. They made her wear it regardless. Even when the schools were still closed, There were programs to feed kids because, believe it or not, a lot of children don't eat if they don't go to school. So, God bless them. The state of Florida tried to keep those programs open. But guess what? If you wanted to do it, you were forced to wear a mask. So don't tell me there were no mask mandates. There were. Moving on. On to this thing with Fauci. All right, because look, nobody was harder on Trump than people like Robert Barnes and I during COVID. Nobody. All right, so I'm just going to let this video play. I mean, you choose not to believe the K-file or not. I don't really care. The fact of the matter is they have the receipts. The only question is, who began to realize Fauci and Birx were full of crap first? And this is why you don't overreach and overpromise, overhype. This is a mistake the DeSantis campaign has made over and over again. Anyone who has deigned to point it out has been attacked, smeared, bridges burned, all sorts of crap. Scorched earth crap for a lie. A lie. Who was critical of Fauci first? And then we'll get into the ultimate thing and their response. And the point being, folks, it's got to be true.
Ron DeSantis has also been attacking former President Trump for once
Gotta
trusting Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's top infectious disease physician.
I think he did great for 3 years, but when he turned the country over to Fauci in March of 2020, that destroyed millions of people's lives.
When he turned the country over to Fauci in March of 2020. The clip I just played you from Fox News was March 19th of 2020. The executive order that he signed was March 17th, 2020.
CNN's K-file has found.
And by the way, as Barnes has pointed out numerous times, he had his own Dr. Fauci in Florida, which is why he did what he did. When that position was void, he gave him an award on the way out. A Fauci sycophant. Anyway, let's roll.
Found some comments that DeSantis himself made about Dr. Fauci at that very same time during the pandemic. CNN K-File senior editor Andrew Kaczynski is here. Andrew, the Florida governor has not always disparaged Dr. Fauci. Tell us more.
Yeah, that's right, Jake. Some pandemic revisionism from the DeSantis campaign, attacking Trump for comments praising Fauci, saying he turned over the country to Fauci. And that's despite that Ron DeSantis was actually praising Dr. Fauci at the exact same time, saying in campaign events that he would defer to Fauci's guidance on the pandemic. He even advocated policies that DeSantis now criticizes as lockdowns. Take a listen to this clip of DeSantis from late March 2020 talking about Fauci.
You have a lot of people there who are working very, very hard, and they're not getting a lot of sleep, and they're really focusing on a big country that we have.
March 25th. Look at the date. That's important. March 25th.
And from Dr. Birx to Dr. Fauci to the vice president, who's worked very hard, the Surgeon General, they are really doing a good job. It's a tough situation, but they're working hard.
So what's actually ironic here, Jake, is that their views on the pandemic were largely the same. You know, DeSantis was one of the first governors to reopen. Trump was urging those reopenings in April, and then he praised DeSantis for doing that.
I have to say this, though. By April, so that statement was made on March 25th. By April 21st, and even actually before that, because Trump was talking about Easter, Donald Trump was saying, if you guys remember, the cure cannot be worse than the disease, right? Or something to that effect. I know, and I remember, because our church took that statement from the president and his urgings that people should be allowed to practice, to observe Easter with their congregations, with their churches, And we asked, whether or not we would be able to implement some sort of guidelines or whatever so we could reopen the church and hold Easter Sunday services. The answer was no. Correct, Laura? Remember, we all had to sit home and watch the pastor on television. All right. So it's incredible. It's really incredible. And well, let's just keep going.
Look at this quote that we got from the spokesperson for the DeSantis campaign when we reached out to them. We asked them about this, and what they told us was that, like most Americans, the governor initially assumed medical officials were going to serve the interests of the people and keep politics out of their decision-making. When it became clear that this wasn't the case, the governor charted his own course and never looked back. Governor DeSantis would have fired Anthony Fauci.
Now, that clip from Brian Griffin right there, that statement from Brian Griffin is the correct statement until the last sentence, because, of course, he had his own Anthony Fauci and he did not fire him, and he gave him awards on the way out. Like I said, number 2, you cannot fire Anthony Fauci. This is the most ridiculous line of argument I think I've ever heard. Nobody could fire Anthony Fauci. Could you demote his influence over COVID policy? Yes, which obviously Donald Trump started to do. Donald Trump got into he began to criticize Dr. Fauci long before DeSantis did. President Donald Trump on Monday sought to downplay tension with and this, by the way, is July 13th, the summer of 2020. He sought to downplay because, he doesn't want the political blowback. He's in the middle of an election year, and people trusted Fauci at this point. He started to downplay tension after the White House official shared a statement that appeared to undermine the nation's leading infectious disease expert. Yeah, because they were already starting to try to change their own policy. Had been. Quote, I have a very good relationship with Dr. Fauci. I've had for a long time. Trump had said at the White House during a roundtable event honoring police officers. I find him to be a very nice person. I don't always agree with him. A senior administration official also told CNN on Monday that recent frustration with Fauci does not stem from a lack of confidence in him. Quote, it's not a crisis in confidence or a warning shot, the official said, adding it would be difficult to fire Fauci. Well, of course it would be, because you can't. You ready? Under federal law, Trump doesn't have the power to directly fire Fauci. He's a career civil servant and remove him from government. And while Trump could try ordering his political appointees to dismiss the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Fauci could appeal in a very time-consuming process. The president, however, does have the power to sideline him, which he began to do, keeping him away from the press briefings and media interviews, as has happened in recent weeks, though Fauci has proven adept at pushing his message through different channels, right? Because what was going on, literally different channels. Fauci began going on different networks and just contradicting the president, including a statement that occurred around this time where Trump said, we will have a vaccine by the new year. And Fauci, because knowing full well that will help Donald Trump's reelection, said we wouldn't. No, it's impossible. And in fact, Dr. Anthony Fauci knew that he was lying, that vaccine was coming. He looked at the advanced monitoring services all the time. From Pfizer, from Moderna, he knew they were close. CNN spoke with Max Stier, president and CEO of Partnership for Public Service, about the history of the federal government's protections for civil servants and what might happen if Trump tried to go ahead with such a move. The conversation, conducted over the phone and lightly edited for flow, is below. CNN. Tension between the president and Fauci has escalated in recent weeks and days. Could Trump fire Fauci for what, and what would that look like? This is what Max said. The president could not fire Fauci without cause. And again, disagreeing with pandemic policy is not cause. There are civil service protections for career federal employees that prevent them from being removed or demoted for political reasons. When you say political reasons, what does that mean? I'll give a tiny bit of history because it's interesting. It goes back actually to 1881 when President James Garfield was assassinated by a would-be job seeker. We had a spoil system that had dominated the government employment base, and it didn't work. We still have a spoil system. You had people coming into positions of public import who were not there because of their capability, but because of their political connections in an unremarkable turnaround, in a remarkable turnabout. Then Vice President Chester Arthur, who was a product of that spoil system himself, supported legislation, the Pendleton Civil Service Reform Act. That was a game changer and professionalized the government employee base. Frankly, I will take the original spoil system over what came out of this damn act anyway. They are still in positions that they're in because of who they know, not because of how they do their job. Give me a break. And it began a long process of making it more and more merit-based. This is a joke. But anyway, that's his own political arm. But, you know, the law is the law. And part of the outcome of that assassination then was a rule system that does not allow political leaders to remove or demote career civil servants without justification. And the justification has to be around poor performance or failure to follow orders. And then there is a process that has to be followed even if there are allegations of performance or misconduct issues. And that process requires written notification and opportunity to respond. So the president would not, in this context, be able to fire Dr. Fauci on the basis of not liking what Tony Fauci had to say. Folks, even if Donald Trump said and blew open what he really couldn't do during Operation Warp Speed, but let's say he said, I'm firing him because he made a known false statement to the public about the availability of the vaccine, about the timeline that the vaccine will be available. Do you think the career bureaucrats who dominate this appellate process are going to side with Donald Trump? This is important because putting this aside is a BS campaign talking point. Right now, Joe Biden is moving, and not Joe Biden. Joe Biden is in Depends, speaking to himself and drooling on himself. Joe Biden's administration is moving to put as many people and agencies under the protection of this as they possibly can. Why? Because unlike in 2016, I mean, I don't know if I want to mention these groups, but certain conservative groups that were filled with neocons and fake conservatives have now essentially been behind closed doors, I would say, or under the radar is a better phrase, have basically seen themselves taken over by Trump loyalists who knew that this was an issue back then, that the president wasn't able to seize control of the government, even though he was elected. They would not listen to him, and he was not in control. And no president will be if the administrative state disagrees with them. This is very important. It doesn't matter if it's Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Barack Obama, Bernie Sanders, Donald Trump. It doesn't matter. If they do good, which is against the interests of the DC administrative state, they will oppose that president and seek to remove control that he has over the executive branch, or she. And you have all these groups now who have made these plans to come in and just clean house and grab control of the executive branch. And right now, Joe Biden is trying. It's important to acknowledge that what the DeSantis campaign is saying is false because of what Joe Biden is trying to do right now. You have to acknowledge these protections for career civil servants like him exist, because if you don't, you're going to wonder why the hell so many more of them are not able to be reformed, fired, replaced, even eliminated to shrink the size and scope of government. So you can pretend because you support a political candidate, you don't. You can pretend Ron DeSantis would fire Fauci, but you're doing yourself and your movement a gross disservice. That was never going to happen. So it sounds like there are quite a few protections that separate him from, say, a Trump cabinet pick. And who are we talking about, right? From pick whom the president could fire via a tweet. Exactly right. A Senate-confirmed political appointee serves at the pleasure of the president. So the president may fire really for any reason a senior political appointee. If Trump did attempt to remove Fauci, could you walk through what that would look like? Would you have to go through Health and Human Service Secretary Alex Azar? The president of the United States couldn't directly fire a career civil servant. They would have to go to someone in their chain of command. And so in this instance, you'd have HHS Secretary Alex Azar or the director of the National Institute of Health, Francis Collins, who I might add is an extraordinary public servant himself, a liberal. And Fauci was one of his mentors when he started. No chance. So it's worth noting that the NIH is not only an amazing science organization, best class in the world, but it is also entirely a career-led organization in government, and so therefore unusual in that respect. In other words, they're a self-perpetuating bureaucracy outside the scope of the elected executive. There's next to no one who is a political appointee, and when you have someone, it's people like Francis Collins, who is a world-class scientist himself. That's translation to there is no chance in hell Francis Collins would have obeyed that order. Okay, and even if someone in the chain of command, and then I know what people would say, well, then get rid of Francis Collins and get somebody else. The same reason why you couldn't get rid of Christopher Wray. Trump had any worth his weight in salt Republican president is going to have the same problem getting their own people in certain positions. The reason Wray was nominated is because he's the only one that would pass the Senate. You have a problem with that, stop electing rhinos like Mitch McConnell and John Thune. And I can go down the list. Okay, and even if someone in the chain of command were willing to dismiss Fauci, there are channels for him to appeal it. And this is important, and I'll end here. That's correct. So he would have to be given, first, notice of what the allegation was. It would have to be misconduct or failure to follow orders or whatever else it might be. Then you would have an opportunity to respond. And if the decision was still made to fire him, he could go to the Merit Services Protection Board and ultimately to a court to claim that he was fired in violation of the civil service rules. Where's that court again? That's right. Now, obviously, we're talking about firing him. It is clearly the case that the president, even if he can't fire him for any reason, he can sideline him, which he did. He doesn't have to listen to advice, nor does he have to include him in the task force or otherwise allow him to be fundamentally in a deciding role. That is a choice the president or other senior political leaders could make. It sounds like Fauci has recourse to a lengthy process of removing him as something the White House wanted to attempt. It can be. And again, the individual, the employee, has to be willing to take on that process. There is no chance. It's, I think, one useful reminder is that Anthony Fauci has been leading the infectious disease component of the NIH since 1984. And he's been serving presidents for the entire time with expert advice. Folks, that's all they're going to do. Walk in a liberal court in front of a liberal judge, if they even gets that far, because all they have to do is get to Anthony Fauci's liberal peers at the board. Are you starting to get some indication of how absolutely impossible it would have been for him to do this? And that is all the political consideration put aside. The fact that in a few months, he has to run for re-election to be president of the United States again. And at this moment, the country has a plus 30 or more favorability rating for Dr. Anthony Fauci. Not going to happen. Now, Trump was reelected. That's a different story. Then you expend what political capital you have. You sideline him. You let him go through the process. You don't care. You got 4 years. It's a lengthy appellate process. No problem. But right now, you don't do it. And there it is. But then he goes on about this merit-based. This tells you how they think. Him leading NIH's infectious disease, administration since 1984, they view, and any judge who's going to hear that or panel is going to hear that, they're going to view that as, the value of his merit. Or the merit of, his and experience, really. And they're going to weigh that against Donald Trump's decision to not, to get rid of him because he doesn't like his advice. or because they're butting heads all the time. These are people who absolutely hate Donald Trump's guts. How do you think this is going to go? So cut the crap. You would have fired Fauci. You would not have fired Fauci. Would somebody who caved within 3 days, and actually I'm being nice because it was public in 3 days. The order was issued on the 17th, one day after that viral video after that video of Clearwater went viral. One day. One day. You expect somebody like that to go through this process of firing Anthony Fauci? Then I got a bridge to sell you. I don't know what to tell you. It's ridiculous. And you better start realizing how ridiculous it is. Because like I said, if you want any of these worthless political hacks to be removed or sidelined, you have to understand you may be dealing with a whole lot more of them than you were dealing with in 2020. Just an article in Real Clear Politics about it the other day. I suggest you look it up. And it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump. It doesn't matter if it's Nikki Haley. It doesn't matter if it's Ron DeSantis. They're going to make it incredibly difficult to do that. Let's take a real quick break. I want to tell you about this great deal from our friends at, of course, 4 Patriots. There are more tropical storms on the horizon. In fact, we just got through one, right? We had a hurricane in Florida. Even though we have our own natural gas generator, it is always good to have plans. Redundancy is key. And that it doesn't even account for the very real concern that extremists are targeting the grid. And if they were to knock out just a few key substations, it would knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. There was an article in Time about it not long ago. That's why you need a solar generator as well. The Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable. It's solar, of course, but it's powerful enough to power your phones, medical devices for you and your loved ones, even appliances like your refrigerator. And you can get one right now if you go to 4patriots.com and use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. This code is for your first purchase only, so make it count. They have incredible savings right now. They have the 2-for-1 generator bundle with the ultimate backup power solution. They stack too, so you can get more power. It's really cool. All right. Plus the panels they got great deals with. You can stack those deals right now with the promo code TPP10. So use the code. It's good for your first purchase. Make it count. Get it yourself. Hundreds of dollars in savings. One more time. 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 at checkout. All right. And what is it? What do we got? 111. Yeah, real quick. Let's tell you about our deal with our friends at Jam and Bean. Feedback is always great. They have the promo code up there for just anybody, right? Java 20. Well, fortunately for you, if you're a listener now, not even a viewer because there's no camera, but a listener of the Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit Show, you can use the promo code TPP40 instead on any new subscription, whether it's for coffee, whether it's for popcorn, their new freeze-dried candy, which is amazing. The Starbursts and the Skittles are delicious and they're cheaper. I just went to the store the other day and somebody was like, look, they got Skittles and the bag size was the same and it was almost twice as much. All right. So you can go to Jam and Bean right now. We'd love to hear your feedback, whether you're getting a subscription for K-Cups or maybe you're somebody who likes freshly roasted coffee that you can grind yourself. These guys, not speaking of COVID, these guys were COVID patriots. These are one of the heroes that I'm telling you about. They're no political heroes. The real heroes were the everyday men and women who had businesses, who fought back. And these guys are one of them. And they also happen to be incredibly talented coffee roasters. You'll love it. I guarantee it. Send us your feedback. We love to hear it. Jamandbean.com. Use the promo code TPP40. That code will get you 40% off the bat off. But still, every month when it renews, you're going to get 10% off with that code just because that's how awesome it is to be a viewer of the People's Pundit, right? So jamandbean.com, promo code TPP40 at checkout. All right. Let's see here, folks. Let's go back to some polls, shall we? I think I'm just going to wind up reading the entire NBC News thing, And then before we do that, we're going to talk about Biden and this new thing Comer said with these bank records. It's unbelievable to me that there are still people who are defending this as if it's not a big deal. Philip Bump had a meltdown a couple of weeks ago because he got asked a slightly hard question about evidence of Biden's bribery. He has a friggin' meltdown over it. Now what? Now what, Philip? I mean, if you just pretend something doesn't exist, doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And Larry, you got it. Larry Schweikert, I just noticed his tweet. Guess he's listening. 100%. The average Republican voter wants revenge. They want, you know what? Revenge, and I would say justice. Justice. They're pursuing a just outcome here. You cannot call yourself a democracy, self-governing society, if every time the sovereign voter elects someone the damn state doesn't like, they do this. 7, almost 8 years, 8 if you count the primary season, of this persecution of this family. And voters are just furious about it. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't need to embarrass him, but in Politico yesterday, it was an article about California being a core nation. It's a joke to pretend that this is competitive anymore. And with the speakers going out there, Trump this week, DeSantis this week, I'm not sure DeSantis' speech is even sold out still. Trump sold out in like 48 hours, and there had still been tickets for DeSantis at the event. I'm talking about the California GOP event. Just a couple of days ago when I looked, 2 days ago. And in Politico, they're basically one guy, I'll just say, who is making the case like, look, the Republican electorate in California is very, very different than people might think. You know, once upon a time, they thought if we make these rule changes, it could help DeSantis because the liberal areas will outweigh the conservative areas because of congressional district allocation. But that didn't happen. And now you have to deal with it as a more statewide vote. And the moderates, the liberals, many of them left. The Republican vote is a working class, a largely working class vote, super conservative. It's getting less white. It is not favorable to a traditional Republican candidate, which is why Jessica Patterson wanted to change the rules. Because for a year, she's been thinking about how she could change the rules in order to help somebody who's not named Donald Trump. Anyway, he says in the article, these indictments have just infuriated people. And, you just can't let them do this. Look at what happened in New York yesterday. And I said it, and somebody who's, I just got to say this, sidetrack for a second. Somebody who's a native New Yorker, my family's from the city, my family came through Ellis Island and, pitched their tent, grounded their flag in the Big Apple. So people who are from the Big Apple know what I say is true here. Even if you leave it, there is an unrelenting love for New York City in your heart. And it pains me to see what a shithole it has become. If I were the Trumps, I'd let them live in their shithole. No famous tower. Gorgeous. Hell, Manhattan wouldn't even look like that. I don't know how many of you guys even know this. Before Donald John Trump came along, nobody wanted to invest in Manhattan. Manhattan was a dump. His father was a developer who was from Queens. That's where the real estate was, Staten Island. Nobody wanted to touch most of Manhattan. It was a total dump. But Trump loved the city and he wanted to revitalize it. And also saw potential because it was real estate value was not as high as he thought it could be. So he had a vision that if, I get this now on the cheap, put a little investment in, we could restore this part of New York to its former glory. Everybody laughed at him, including his own father. I'm not kidding. Woolman Park would be a puddle of mud where homeless junkies with mental illness bathe naked in front of everybody. No pretty roller skating rink. The liberals in the city of New York couldn't even do that correct. He had to take it over and fix it. And now it's the beautiful rink that it is today. They just gave it up to the city not long ago. I think it was a year ago. Management of it. Watch it turn to shit. Like everything else these people touch. No restaurant for you, Robert De Niro, if it wasn't for Donald Trump. The rest of them were ready to hightail it out of there after 9/11. So I say let him have it. Let him live in the proper shithole it would have been if it wasn't for you. Whether you like Donald Trump or not, that's true. They drove it into the ground, and no two men had done more to make New York, restore New York to what it became, which was beautiful again before the de Blasio years. No two men did more to do that than Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. And I'll tell you right now, if a pollster called me and asked me, do you approve of the job Michael Bloomberg is doing? I would have said strongly approve. Only later in his tenure did he get nuts. But he largely continued with the Giuliani policies. And New York under Bloomberg for a while was beautiful. It was beautiful. But he wasn't reinventing the wheel. No Fox News Corp. No Fox affiliates without Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. I'm not kidding. Look it up. There's so much to the state of New York, the city of New York. The positive, not the negative. If it wasn't for Rudy Giuliani and Donald Trump, it wouldn't be there. It would be a proper shithole. And they should let it become that. It's a shame because, you have the famed Trump Tower everyone loves. Ungrateful. I'm serious. The only thing that judge knows, because of his world, this is his experience. The day before his ruling, he picked up the Washington Post and he read Trump plus 10. He said, oh, shit. Better get working on that opinion. This is who they are. You think I'm kidding? I'm not kidding. You think he, debated this in his head? He did not. No jury trial. Well, I can't imagine why. I say let them have. What I'm saying is, I don't think New York deserves people like them anymore. And I am a native New Yorker. I haven't lived there for years, and I consider myself a Southerner now, frankly. I'm sorry, I do. Because the Big Apple's never coming back. It's amazing, the change. From the idiot liberal mayor who was elected because white liberals wanted to elect somebody with a different color skin, so they could feel good, like they're good white wasps. The city was a dump. I couldn't even go to the ATM with my mother. I'm not joking. Certain times at night, you'd have to step over the bums who would be sleeping in front of the ATM. And I'm not making fun of them at all. I feel bad for every person who doesn't have a roof over their head. It's horrible. It was dangerous. It was dangerous, and I still loved it. Because I gotta be honest, I loved it because I still believed in it. I believed in the people, and eventually that it would get bad enough they would do the right, and they did. But I just don't believe in their capacity to do that now. I'm sorry. The institutions are too corrupted. They were not when somebody like Giuliani came around. Were they corrupt? Of course they were. But I mean, there's like an ideological corruption. I have to explain that differently. There's always been a machine. It's always been corrupt. But there's like an ideological corruption where you have these people who would rather see everything turn to rubble so they could rule over the rubble than be servants in heaven. Like that's just true. It's just, or, heaven on earth. Anyway, I digress. Such a shame. CBS News poll. Trump leads in Iowa and New Hampshire, where retail campaigning hasn't closed the gap. In fact, it's gotten worse. The conventional wisdom is that retail politics, the door knocking, handshaking grassroots, campaigning for months before the primaries, make Iowa and New Hampshire different from what we see nationally. And like a lot of conventional wisdom these days, that looks outdated, or that's looking outdated. Today, the national frontrunner and former President Donald Trump also leads the Republican primary field comfortably in both Iowa and New Hampshire. Boy, how stupid does the University of New Hampshire poll look right now? 37%. I was waiting for Anselm College because to me, I don't care. They got Baldack wrong. Everybody got something wrong because Republicans were not prepared to deal with the get out the vote infrastructure that Democrats have built in the post-COVID world. Many of us who, missed races for the first time, I don't think we polled them wrong at all. I think Democrats are beating the polls because they're beating the system. Because it is, in fact, rigged. And Republicans don't know how to unrig it. At least as of now, they don't. I am starting to see signs of people understanding that. I'm just not sure they're there yet. Most of his supporters are backing him enthusiastically. His current margins would translate to him getting half of Iowa's delegates and the lion's share in New Hampshire. We're going to look at that in a second. Because I've been trying to impress upon you the importance of delegate rules. All right? The polls are worse than they look. Okay? Once we get past Iowa and New Hampshire, go on to South Carolina, his polling lead is so large, he's going to take every single delegate. Every single one. Even though it's a hybrid system. There's a low threshold in New Hampshire. So there are, estimates for DeSantis and Christie and Haley and others. But God, between these polls and the Anselm College polls, they're capped. They're capped. Voters have started to decide, to make their minds up. This poll asked a question really weird, and I know. But it's one poll, taken against the weight of all the other evidence and my own polling, which I trust more than anything. By the way, support the Public Polling Project. Link is in the description. Let's get to Georgia. Let's do the national. I'll oversample the Rust Belt. We'll do the national and the Rust Belt together. Come on, folks. GOP voters in both states overwhelmingly say their focus is on national, not state issues. Going back again to why COVID does not matter. To them, the administrative state, the economy, beating Joe Biden. Beating Joe Biden is so important because you can't fix the economy or combat the administrative state's corruption and persecution without beating Joe Biden. Nor is there much provincially when it comes to asking for time in state. Trump's lead is much the same, whether people feel it's important to see candidates stump in Iowa or Hampshire or not. You know why I think that is? And I'm just telling you from the voters we've personally had conversations with. I think they understand that a corrupt government is trying to bankrupt him and that he has to be wise with his time and his money. I think most voters understand that. As in years past, these states might share a place on the calendar, but not always in ideology. One important difference today is on abortion. In Iowa, most GOP caucus voters would not only have abortion illegal, but would also criminally punish a woman for having one. That is not the case in New Hampshire. National issues, Iowa, 88, New Hampshire, 88. State and locals, Iowa, 12, New Hampshire, 12. I got to be honest, that's a little bit of a surprise that it's like dead on to me in both states. Should it be similar? Yeah, I almost feel like they accidentally asked the same question to one state and just copied it to the other. I mean, well, it could be like 90, 99, 90 to 9, 88 to 11. Or I guess if there's no choice to answer for unsure, 88 to 12, 90 to 10. But having them both on the same, like, that's a little weird. Candidates spending more time in your state than voters. Iowa 21, New Hampshire 18. For very important. Not to or not at all, 44 and 49. Listen, the DeSantis people have been wrong about everything. Seth Levy has been absolutely correct about that. Every assumption they've made has been incorrect. Every single one of them. From a majority of Republicans want someone other than Trump, which I've debunked over and over again. It's not the same thing. When Trump is at 40 or 45% in a poll, it does not mean a majority don't want him. That doesn't mean that. All right, it's just basic statistics. I mean, this is the problem. Polls are not being reported correctly. People aren't being told what something actually does mean or does not mean. Among 2024 caucus goers, who would you vote today? This is Iowa. Trump 51, DeSantis 21. Haley 8. Scott 6. And I actually think this is probably closer. I think DeSantis would do a little bit better. Why? Because it is still a very conservative state. He has infrastructure. The other two really don't. The lane for the Rubio lane is much, much, much smaller than it was in 16. Ramaswamy is not the kind of candidate who would do great in Iowa. He's not. Christie, not at all. I don't know why Asa Hutchinson's even running other than to give his consultants more money. It's a grift. Mike Pence is obviously playing a role. That's why he's running. So is Chris Christie. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if, Christie didn't get even 1%. I'm not kidding. Pence, he's going to get some single digits probably, But the Haley and Scott lane together, 14%, that's lower than the Rubio lane. So I do think that DeSantis would probably do better than some of the other polls are suggesting, even though what we have 19. So we had a very, very close result to this one. We had Trump 51. You know what? I don't want to spit it out of nowhere. Let's see. Oh, wow. Right there. The Iowa caucus data wrapper. We had Trump at 51, DeSantis 19. All other candidates were in single digits. This was, before the Haley move. We actually saw Tim Scott in third at that time, which I told you was like, at the time, I said, I see parallels with what Tim Scott is doing with what we saw Marco Rubio do at the end there. And there's always some movement and shifting within the lanes at the last minute. So ultimately, who ends up with that lane is going to be curious. We'll see. Listen, if Nikki Haley ends up with 12%, they're going to make a big deal out of it to try to give her momentum. She overperformed expectations. Try to slingshot her into New Hampshire and South Carolina. If Tim Scott does, they'll dump Nikki in a second, and it'll be about him. That's just what they're going to do. DeSantis, 21. Iowa is a make or break for Ron DeSantis. Let's cut the crap. A strong second is not good enough. Strong second would have to be Trump at like 51, DeSantis at like 48, and everyone else just nothing. That's the only way DeSantis would be able to justify continuing if he doesn't win Iowa. They're having this debate at the end of November with Sean Hannity. Very bad idea. Let me just say this right now. Ron DeSantis, listen, Governor DeSantis, Sean Hannity is not going to save you. He's not smart enough. This is a bad idea. You're not a good debater. You don't have personality. Gavin Newsom is going to steamroll you and Sean Hannity both. He's going to steamroll both of you. Mark my words. This is a bad idea. You're doing it in a Hail Mary because you're desperate. When you were polling higher, you didn't even want to do it. You are better off taking off your pants and running around Iowa in your underwear to get attention than you are going on with Sean Hannity to debate Gavin Newsom. All he has to do is play the one clip of you praising him for what he did in California with COVID. I took mercy and didn't play that clip before during the COVID segment. I took mercy on you, man. You said, well, we're going to do a lot of what California did. We're going to have the California model. Bad idea. Stay in Iowa. Or better yet, you're, according to the article in Politico, your fans in New Hampshire are begging you to come back to the grounded state. The problem is the Steve Deeses and the Bob Vandersplats killed you in New Hampshire. And idiots are like, hey, those polls came out. They were conducted, most of them, before even these comments about abortion. Okay. As if the mailer after mailer going out. As if these New Hampshire voters don't know about the ads and the messaging. Come on. Cannot do that. You cannot appease religious leaders in Iowa. That's not even true. Certain religious leaders. You cannot appease the usual, what Robert calls fake Christian leaders who think they're kingmakers. You cannot do that without knowing that you will sacrifice New Hampshire and probably South Carolina, because South Carolina, in many respects, is closer to New Hampshire than when it comes to some of the moderate blocks of voters than it is as close to Iowa, even though South Carolina is a southern state. And that is more true today than it even was in 2016. Things have changed. A lot more moderate Republicans from the Northeast have moved to Horry County, South Carolina, in this 7-year time frame. In New Hampshire, Trump 50, DeSantis 13, Haley 11, Ramaswamy 8, Christie 8. I got to tell you, in the Anselm College poll, which I will show you as well, because the Anselm College poll was, you know what? I could just go and get it from my Twitter. I trust Anselm College more when it comes to New Hampshire, guys. I do. They're just, again, one, somewhat mistake in 2022 does not outweigh the fact that they had been right when everybody else was just totally wrong. So, I mean, you could choose to listen to another poll that has never been right, or you can choose to listen to a poll that got it wrong once. I mean, to me, this isn't even a close question. Where is it? Come on. Trying to get it because while we have these numbers here, I want it to, here it is. Yeah, so in Anselm, they have Trump at 45, Haley at 15, DeSantis at 11, Christie at 10, Ramaswamy at 6. So let's split the difference there. Let's call it Trump, even if he's at 50 here, he's just under 50. Haley 15 to 11. Let's say she's ballpark around 13. DeSantis at 11 here. He's at 13, so he'd be at 12. He'd get some delegates. Christie at 10, but he's at 8 there, and he does appear to be hitting a cap. If you go through Anselm and this poll, what you'll see is that Chris Christie really only has the ability to get about 25% of the vote. He can't get any more than that. So he's put all his eggs in one basket in New Hampshire, which he did in 2016. Here's the problem, though. 70+% of primary voters in New Hampshire can't stand his guts. They hate his guts. Mike Pence is no better. He's only like 2 points better. So they don't have the ability to do any better than a few delegates. I'm not understanding you have to understand it in the context of they're playing a role. Molly Hemingway wrote a great column the other day, and I don't agree with her premise that, Chris Christie could even win a Senate seat in New Jersey. But yeah, Bob Menendez underscored they're going to need a good Republican candidate. I think Christie sucks and he's unpopular in New Jersey. So I disagree with that. But you're unpopular everywhere. So you might as well just run in your own state where you may have a marginally better chance because it's your hometown, your home turf advantage. Same thing with Larry Hogan. And what our argument was is, the hell are you all planning on running for or running at all? You have zero chance to win the Republican nomination and zero chance to be president. If you truly care about all the things that you claim to care about, saving the country, right? Then you would run for Senate to help Republicans control the Senate. Ditto to you, Governor Sununu. You're not running, but you're just making sure Trump's not president. We need to save the country. So run for Senate. If you would have ran in 2022, maybe Republicans would have the Senate today, Sununu. But you were a selfish prick, and you decided you weren't going to do it. And Baldak lost, who now somehow is being painted as a Trump candidate simply because Trump gave him his last-minute endorsement. Baldak was totally anti-Trump the entire damn campaign. I just don't. The way the people come up with this crap, I really don't know. Anyway, I don't agree with Molly's premise that they could win these races simply because they were governors, because you know how I feel about that. Gubernatorial elections are not particularly strong when it comes to national office. And that is especially true with presidents. With presidential vote preference, it doesn't matter at all. Gubernatorial elections do not matter at all. But, Senate may make them a somewhat stronger candidate. The problem is we have plenty of evidence to show that popular governors at one point still went down. For instance, if Andy Beshear was to run for Senate, he may be, his approval rating may be very, very positive in Kentucky, but it doesn't mean he's going to be able to win a race in Kentucky for U.S. Senate. Phil Bradenson was supposed to be an extremely strong Democrat because he was very much a popular Beshear-like Democratic governor in a southern state, and yet Marshall Blackburn kicked his ass all over the place. So, it doesn't always translate. Can it sometimes in a certain year? Yeah, but I don't think it's because they were popular governors. So again, I disagree with that premise, but I 100% agree with our argument, which really underscores that it is not about principle for these people. It is about ambition, because regardless of what anybody believes, it is overwhelmingly true. It's not debatable. Even if you're a Republican, it is far more lucrative to be anti-Trump than it is to be pro-Trump. To play the anti-Trump role in politics and media is much more lucrative. They get the book deals. They get the contributorships, right? Pro-Trump people do not. They don't. They just don't. In another gauge of what's driving the campaign, voters in both states report seeing ads on television and social media more than any other direct contact with a campaign or volunteer. All the above will probably still matter on the organizational front when people actually have to caucus or stand in line to vote this winter. The impact of local political endorsers, I got to laugh my ass off at this, folks. Here we go. Like governors and congressional leaders look limited at best. Look, forpatriots.com, promo code TPP10. It may be that in an era of big spending campaigns and social media, when voters can hear the opinions of so many, top elected officials, even friends and family, don't necessarily carry that much weight. That said, it may also be a function of a contest where the leading candidate is so well known and voters don't need endorsements as much to get to know the field. For now, however, the dominant power of being a well-known and still popular former president in Republican circles appears to have the same outsized impact on preference in these states as it does nationally. How many times have I been on Newsmax now with Sebastian Gorka, and he has asked me, Dr. Gorka said, Rich, I hear all the time, national polls don't matter. Is that true? And I told him the answer is no. It is not true. National polls tend to be leading indicators of how states are moving. And I got to tell you, in the case of Iowa, of course, it's a different electorate than it is nationally, but we're in a different year this year. We are not looking at the normal dynamic. All the other candidates are subject to the textbook or political playbook rules. You play for Iowa and you play to keep, and you're trying to throw all your eggs in that basket, you're going to sacrifice New Hampshire. If you're playing for New Hampshire, you're going to kill yourself in Iowa. Not Donald Trump. Donald Trump can, and almost assuredly, will win both of them. And it doesn't look particularly close. That is not normal. That is for all the talk from people about moving on and this and that. That shows political observers like myself the strength of a candidate. If you win Iowa and New Hampshire, you are a strong candidate. You have an appeal to generally all elements of the party, which is why Donald Trump is holding so much of his 2020 vote. It's like these people on Twitter are like, I don't think you understand. I was a 2-time Trump voter and I'll never vote for him again. Okay, you're like statistically insignificant. You act like you're 15, 20% of the electorate. You're not. And the Trump or bust vote dwarfs you in comparison. ABC News poll just showed exactly what we showed. Less than 2% for Trump, 7% for Biden. And with Trump leading among the new entrances into the electorate. For now, however, the dominant power being, right, the former president. Because he is still popular, and I would even say adored. He's extremely well-liked by the party, and even among people who are considering other candidates, Trump is very well liked. Steve Kornacki tried to point this out last week in his article. That's the challenge for the other candidates. All right, seen ads on local TV. All right, so you can see they're getting hit pretty hard. Being contacted by a volunteer, about 1 in 4. And I know that's lower, but at this point in time, that's not that bad at all. I'm just looking at what they spend their money on, and it's like, I think they could do better with social media and text messages. Emails are not, well, I'm not going to say anything. Never mind. Whose endorsement matters most? I love this graphic because I just think it's so damn hilarious. You know, Steve Deese and others pretend like he wasn't supporting DeSantis for months. Then when he officially endorses, he thinks it's going to matter or something. Like as if one, everyone didn't know you already supported DeSantis. And two, anyone gives a damn about your opinion. They don't. It's obvious. Even Kim Reynolds, who comes in second here, only 16% say that if Kim Reynolds endorses Ron DeSantis, it will matter. And by the way, not all of those are positive responses. There are some in that 16% who no doubt say that because they don't like her. And if she endorses DeSantis, they're going to vote for somebody else. That's not the majority here. The majority is definitely people who are favorable to her. But her approval rating, since she has decided to take on Donald Trump and align herself, even though not officially yet, align herself with Governor DeSantis, her approval rating has collapsed. Faith leaders like Bob Vanderplatz, who thinks he's a kingmaker. Nobody gives a damn about Bob Vanderplatz's opinion. None. The pastors who keep telling people to go down the primrose path every year, nobody cares. That should be a reflection on you. They should look at themselves in the mirror after seeing this poll. What is it about you that the voters reject so much? Trump's perceived strengths, including electability. Here's what it comes down to. Trump's big lead comes because of the qualities tested. He does very well on being a strong leader and because they think he's going to beat Biden. It's that simple. It doesn't matter whether they think he's likable or not. They don't give a damn. Half of them say he understands people like them or describe him as a true conservative. He nonetheless has a dominant lead among self-described conservative voters. And that's just, look, so strong leader, 79% in Iowa, 67% in New Hampshire. He's prepared, 62%, 54%. Understands people like you, 44%, 41%. He could do better with that. And even being a true conservative, 34%, 39%. It's not what it, he's, to people in Iowa, he's conservative enough for me. Maybe he's not even a true conservative, but he governed like one. And guess what? He can beat Joe Biden. That's what matters to them, because none of the rest of it matters. The electability argument that DeSantis was making was always going to fall apart. Once people like me, David, Matt, others started looking at that Trump or bust vote, that was going to blow up in their face immediately. You're talking about a guy who lost by 40-something thousand votes for re-election, even though he's the first president in history to increase his support from his initial election to another and lose. He got and is the most highest vote getter of any incumbent president in history. If you don't think there's something wrong with those metrics and that he lost, then there's something wrong with your brain. Why they beat Biden, percentage of GOP, my God, Rich, would they beat Biden percentage of GOP voters? There you go. Definitely, it's Trump's going away because people don't believe that the rest of them can. Even though Haley now is outperforming as far as the margin, Haley is outperforming the entire field right now. She has the biggest marginal lead in real clear politics. Here's the problem and why voters are being smart here. The margin does not matter as much as the level of support. Bill Maher and James Carville, before they got too drunk and started making absolutely offensive statements about how dumb Republicans are, they were making good comment about this. They were having a good conversation. Biden's support falls against Haley because they don't know anything about Nikki Haley other than that she can stand in front of a camera and smile. She's just generic right now. That will not hold. Just like it did not hold for Ron DeSantis. Once people get to know them more, Haley has no chance to beat Joe Biden. She has zero chance. The margin is not as important as the level of support. And Trump's level of support, because it's universal name ID against another candidate's universal name ID, you're seeing real ballot tests. DeSantis now is at a point where his name ID is high enough where you're seeing real ballot tests. He is trailing. He would lose. Haley is a joke. This is a joke. The +6s and that and it. The last time we polled Nikki Haley, she was at 34%. Again, let's do another national poll. Support the public polling project. Share it far and wide. I would love nothing more than to throw Nikki Haley in there. Because I'm curious to see whether or not it's just the methodology of the university and media polls continuing to just focus on these high interest people for the most part. I don't think the ABC Washington Post poll would have found what other people are finding. I don't. The NBC News, CNN, Fox News did, but honestly, Fox News was more believable because the margin was not that big and all you saw was support levels fall. That's what you would expect. You wouldn't expect to see crap the way you do. Again, in New Hampshire, it's an even bigger margin for Trump on definitely. So majorities, solid majorities, say definitely Trump will win. What they're really telling you there, what they're really saying to you is, I know I'm not taking a risk with Trump. I'm taking a risk with these other people. They're not tested. I don't think they can win. All right. So motivate conservatives and Republicans, appeal to moderates. You can see the difference between Iowa and New Hampshire. All right. We only have a few minutes left. So I'm pretty much done with that. I have to, let me see, is this the right one? There were two stories I wanted to show you. One was on Biden's handling of classified information, and then the other one is Comer, both from ABC News. And I have been hearing from more than one person that essentially ABC News, being George Stephanopoulos has a huge voice there. Essentially, ABC News is trying to lead the Biden is in deep trouble charge, and we need to do something about this. Where is that ABC? Come on. Where did you go? I clicked off it, and now it's gone. But here is another one, which I just find interesting that they're just doing these pile-ons, right? So here we go. This is now from the classified documents probe. All right. From secretaries to Secretary of State, Biden documents probe casts wide net sources. Investigators have interviewed scores of witnesses, some more than once. The federal investigation into Biden's handling of classified documents prior to becoming president has grown into a sprawling examination of Obama-era security protocols and internal White House processes, with investigators so far interviewing scores of witnesses, including Secretary of State Anthony Blinken. Sources familiar with the ABC investigation told ABC News, the investigation told ABC News. This is interesting. And why do I care about this? If you go to Matt Bevin's Twitter feed right now, okay, you will see that for the most part, absolutely nobody covered this story, or the story about the bank records with Hunter Biden. Yet NBC has covered them both. I mean, ABC, excuse me. ABC News has covered them both. And I got to tell you guys, to me, that's interesting. CNN ignoring it, NBC ignoring it, on and on. I find this to be interesting that ABC News is covering it. And I'm trying to look for this other one because it was more. Hunter sues Rudy. How ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Bank transfers. Maybe that's what I really got to put in here. All right. So, I mean, they're, and I know I'm almost out of time here. Yeah, I'm almost out of time here. So, did want to read this to you, but I guess I'm not going to have the time to do that. So let's just stick with this and try to get it as quick as we can. Federal prosecutors and FBI agents from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's office have been interviewing witnesses for nearly 9 months. Now, again, I don't expect them to do a damn thing about this. I really don't. The FBI is just too corrupt. The Justice Department is too corrupt. They only indict people when they feel like they need something. And I actually think the indictment of Bob Menendez is for a way for them to say, look, see, we're consistent. We're not hypocrites. That's why we want to remove Trump from the ballot. When you are using that standard, what you're essentially saying is the Department of Justice, a bunch of unelected hack bureaucrat crooks, have the ultimate say in who can and cannot serve in the U.S. Congress, who can and cannot serve or run even for the presidency. This is outrageous. Do we have due process? Do we have the presumption of innocence, or do we not? The last time they tried to charge Bob Menendez, it fell apart. It sounded and looked real bad then, too. He already has a plausible explanation for the cash. The text messages with his wife are the most damning thing, in my opinion, but I don't know. He may have I don't know. I know I'm an American. And in America, we give the presumption of innocence to people who have been alleged, accused. Which brings me really, I guess, spend the last minute talking about anything, it brings me to this. The ultimate reason why people are having so much so much trouble understanding, why did the COVID attacks not work on Trump? Why is lawfare not working on Trump? I don't think it would work on Menendez either if there weren't just so many hacks who saw a political opportunity and smell blood in the water and think that they can use Bob's misfortune to their benefit. Why? Because this is not the 1980s anymore. The government has lost something we refer to in international relations and elsewhere, I'm sure, but word we would use. They lost a little something called regime credibility. Not just Republican voters, general election voters do not trust Trump's enemies. From the media to the FBI to the Department of Justice, they know they're deeply corrupt, and they are. You know, if it was still the 1980s or once, you know, that earth is that? I don't even know. ABC News. Sorry, let's get rid of it. Once upon a time, they would, just with a prosecutor's allegation, take the word of those federal prosecutors because they trusted them. Educated G-men, they would never do that. But they don't trust them anymore, and with good reason. It has been getting, bad for years. The Obama administration going into the seditious undermining of the Trump administration just killed it. Bad actors like Robert Mueller, who has been a bad actor for years, kind of a piece of crap, keeps innocent people locked up to protect Whitey Bulger. His protege, Jim Comey, the disgusting Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Andy McCabe, Peter Baker, all of them. They totally kill faith in the Fed. So when they see an indictment, GOP voters are like, whatever. And general election voters are like, yeah, join the club. It's a big part. It's a big deal. And I don't think people understood that. All right. Listen, today is, and I'm going to do this. I don't know if you know this. I haven't tweeted it yet, but I will be tweeting it very soon. Today is a campaign. Those of us who support free speech, back Rumble. It's our way of saying we support free speech too. Giving away a month on Locals. If you go to Locals right now and use this promo code, and by the way, you don't have to stay signed up. This is a gesture. This is a gesture for those of us who are standing with Rumble and others who have not buckled yet. Okay? So go to the Locals link that is in the description and use this promo code right here. Support free speech, all one word. Support free speech. That will give you a 1 month all access pass to the Locals community on peoplespundit.locals.com. All right. And again, you can cancel when you're done at the end of the month. I hope you don't. I hope you stick around. But that is a campaign you'll probably see from a lot of others today as well. But this is something that Locals has put together. And we said, yes, we'll sign us up. We stand with Rumble. We stand with, but there's so few anymore. And I'm sorry, Elon, but you don't get in that category yet. When you put Alex Jones back on Twitter, when you put my wife back on Twitter, when you put the most accurate election projection model on the internet back on Twitter, then maybe I'll consider it. But right now, it's solidarity with Rumble and others that are supporting free speech. All right, so use the promo code support free speech. peoplespundit.locals.com. You can actually, and I'm going to tweet it out very soon, peoplespundit.locals.com promo support free speech will get you right there just to sign up. All right, let me put that up for you guys. Actually, not hard. Why won't it? Oh, because it's I can't edit when it's up. Duh. All right, see what happens when I try to do it without Laura. That's the whole thing. So it's just support free speech. So peoplespundit.locals.com/support promo support free speech. And again, I will put this in, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and put it in the Locals thing, YouTube thing. YouTube, this is a great opportunity to move over if that's what you've been wanting to do. And you're just like, hey, I'm already a member of YouTube and I don't want to be double charged. I get it. If you are a member but not a supporter right now on Locals, and there it is. I just put it in the chat for you. And Getter, of course, all of you guys, you want to jump on right now and support us on that front, you can. And it tells us that, you're obviously on board with Rumble as well. All right. So, yeah, I'm glad I didn't forget that. I almost did, damn near. I don't know how, but I almost did. Whoa. That's me, myself, and I. All right. And Rumble, there you go. That's for you. What else am I missing, Laura? Nothing, right? Traveling tomorrow. Probably do some short streams to say, hey, what's up? I got a long drive. So I might as well just shoot the what with you guys. Laura's actually looking for something I can kind of like mount in the car and I don't have to worry about it, which would be really cool. And then Friday, we'll probably just do this kind of pop-in short stream stuff, like shorter with the People's Pundit or something. Yeah, something like that. Yeah, one of these. And yeah, that's probably it until next Monday. And then we'll be on Timcast, of course, Friday night. Don't miss it. You're not going to want to miss that. That would be really interesting, really cool. And Friday morning, I'll be on Talk of the Town. All right. So for my Carolinians, if you're from that area, you know what I'm talking about. All right. So I'm talking with Patrick and Henry. That'd be cool. Okay. I'm looking forward to that. Great guys. Always great guys. Plus they're super, super happy I got Ted Bud right. Right, Laura? I was like, listen, I may be right about Pennsylvania. I may be wrong about Pennsylvania, but I'm not wrong about Ted Bud in North Carolina. North Carolina is a tricky state. A lot of people have difficulty with it. Mehmet Oz should have won that election in Pennsylvania. He didn't because they did not have the campaign apparatus and because the party was not unified up and down the ticket. And the opposition to Doug Mastriano by the rhinos in the Republican Party and the Ricketts who control the Republican Governors Association, they cost Mehmet Oz that seat because they were too busy withholding and claiming poor and not giving them support and not realizing that in doing so, you could depress turnout further and you could cost other candidates elections. And that's exactly what happened. All right. So there we have it. All right. With that in mind, it's 2:05. I'm going to kick rocks. Nothing but love for you guys. And I will see you tomorrow for locals for sure. You'll see us in the car. And anybody, you should all actually, whether you're looking on Getter right now or you're looking on YouTube or anything, you should have used that code right now and go sign up. And then, the stuff we'll be doing in the next couple of days. There it is again. And again, watch my Twitter feed. I'll put it up on Locals. I'll put it up on Truth. I'll put it up on Getter. I'll put it everywhere. I'll even put it in the community section on YouTube. And you can sign up and get a free month of the People's Pundit. Well, peoplespundit.locals.com community. All right. I'm out. Looks like that's all she wrote. I really wanted to spend more time on Biden. So maybe we'll do that while we're shooting the in the car. Later, folks. Thanks for watching. Actually, thanks for listening this time.